Hello, selectors! And I've got a little extra that I wanted to do. So, we were having issue in testing with trying to figure out how Ener flow worked in Umir. Just because it was always really tight to get to get all the things that we're trying to do costed out there. Not to mention it's also colored very tightly too, like it requires a lot of blue to function. I knew, generally speaking, that I didn't have enough Ener, but I couldn't really figure out pinpoint where and when I needed that Ener, so I made a much more crazy little calculator here. I'm not going to go super deep into the calculator itself, but I'll just talk about the bare bones of it, and then I'll fill it out like I did here, so that you can see what I figured out. And this is the turns on the side over here. It's basically turn one defense step, right? This is your opponent's turn. And then the average enter that you get per each of those half turns, right? Half turn rotations. And the idea of it being that your opponents are going to kill some amount of signies to open up lanes, as well as you're going to enter charge on your turns. As well as you'll be taking damage for some of them. This costs. I basically did like 100 mock games with various decks to get the average costs of these things, and it ends up being about this. If you want the like TLDR, it's that you end up with about an average of 21 enter per game. If the opponent's really resource denying you, you might end up with 16 or 18 enter per game, and then if you go into a really long game against like a mid-range opponent, you might end up with like 25 enter. But relatively speaking, this is the breakdown of when you get your enter. So you can just steal my math here and do this yourself if you wanted, in order to make your costs. Now, I expanded my costs here. You probably just have a single column of all of your costs. But I expanded it a little bit just to understand, where I'm putting stuff in. And I also put a little tabby here for enter charge, because I expect to use this for Bang at one of these days, and Bang enter charges quite a bit. And that amount of enter should be added into this number, but isn't the average cost, and I just want to make this calculator a little more reusable for me. And then what it ends up doing, and I can just sort of delete here for a second, is over on here in this column, I basically add all of these continuously, and you can see, like I said, 27 enter here, and then by the time you're starting your turn 6, you've taken either 21 damage or 21 enter, and then you've got your 22 because you just put in an enter. So it ends up being a nice little calculator to figure out exactly where my decks are messing up in terms of enter, and I thought you guys could probably benefit off of this. For the Umir deck itself, my costs ended up being 0 cost to grow to level 1, 1 cost to grow to level 2, and then 2 costs to grow to level 3. My pieces here are Summer Lives Blues down here. This is the cost to grow to not grow, excuse me. This is the cost to use Can't Stop Pretty. And then all my other assists are free with the exception of Madoka Break, which costs 5, and that's where most... I knew that was sort of the issue, is that's where most of my enter costs go into. And then I've got some other costs, right? And this is like in the average of like 4 or 5 games that I played with the Umir deck just to see where I got them. I usually use this 1 enter for random drain either or turn 1 or 2. And then in the end, sort of late game, I ended up using a Hamlin Great Trap, and also another what do you call it? Another random drain, and then generally speaking over here, like turn 6, I probably will use another draw spell, and that would end up being here. And where I found was that this was my issue. I didn't have any enter charge. So right here, where I wanted to use, I actually could still Madoka float perfectly successfully, but my issue was I was not always hitting the time that I wanted to hit the Summer Lives Blues. And so that ended up being where this enter cost needed. I needed at least 1 more enter, and also you'll see that I didn't really have any wiggle room with my enter. So if my opponent was enter starving me or enter hurting me at all, this Madoka break was very likely not going to happen. And I'm trying to have the Madoka break either as early as 2.5, or a turn, my defense step on turn 2 going into my turn 3, so that I can have a 3-3-1 Signy split. So the latest I want it is that 3.5, right? So this is kind of an issue. I could theoretically hold off on the can't stop pretty until turn 2 or something in order to make that work. That's kind of the cool thing with the calculator too, is you can kind of play with it and figure out like, actually I need to hold this off so that way I have the Madoka break enter. But what ended up happening was I put enough in the deck that I'm almost guaranteed at least one enter charge by turn 1 or 2 with the deck, and that sort of just fixes everything. Everything sort of becomes much nicer in terms of enter for that. And that was with Hyacinth, the level 1 that lets you enter charge in blue. So it's kind of an interesting calculator to look at. You know, when you do this type of thing, you can click those numbers and automatically see them change up on stuff. I'd offer this myself, but I don't really want to give all of my equations out for people to accidentally like mess with, and then I won't be able to do. So if you want it yourself, I explained how you can make it, and like I'll just real quick do that so that you guys can see what the equations that I'm working with. If any of you guys are spreadsheet gamers, which it feels like is a fair amount of people being spreadsheet gamers. So I don't think that's a crazy ask. So yeah. Anyways, that's all. I just wanted to give you guys a calculator that you could potentially work with if you wanted to do something. But the overall, if you're gonna take anything away from it, you get about 21 enter a game. So add up all of your like turn costs that you're gonna run into, and if it hits 21, you know, you're probably good. If it doesn't hit 21, you got to rethink what you're doing or add some kind of enter charge to it.